hosted an interview with the trainers of the African Canadian Leadership Training and Capacity Support Program. And tonight I'm going to introduce you to them. You're going to hear them explain to you and to the participants about what to expect in this training that is about to come, the 13-week training that we are providing to the participants of the African Canadian Leadership Training and Capacity Support. The reason why I wanted to bring you these interviews is because I wanted you to see that the training we're providing is a training that is provided by leaders in their own areas. Starting with our flag program, it is the art of community organizing, led by Olivia Chow. Olivia Chow has led the Institute for Change Leaders and has helped train over 5,000 activists in political organizing. Olivia Chow has 2 certificates from Harvard Kennedy School's Executive Education Program and 9 years of teaching experience. Olivia Chow has also been one of Canada's most effective and well-known public figures. She has served 2 terms as school trustee, 4 terms as Toronto City Councillor, and 8 years as Member of Parliament. This is the person that is going to provide our flag program, the art of community organizing. Our next trainer for the individual goal and life purpose training is going to be Dr. Olutoyin Ayalade. Dr. Olutoyin Ayalade is a partner at Invoca. She manages and oversees all aspects of business development and operations for the group. Before then, she was with the CASA Development and the International Group. At various times in her career, she had responsibility for funds management and client management operations in the financial services sector covering Europe, Africa, and North America. For our good governance and capacity building training, we will have Mr. Emmanuel Meles, who currently is the Executive Director of the National Advancement for Black Communities. Mr. Emmanuel is a social entrepreneur with more than 23 years of senior management roles in various subsectors of the non-for-profit sector: settlement and immigration, community health, social service and community development, and funding and sector capacity. Emmanuel Meles has a wide-ranging expertise and experience in various areas of non-for-profit organizational resiliency and sector effectiveness, community capacity building, strategic planning, community-based peace building, diversity and inclusion, evaluation and measurement planning and management, governance, talent development, and so forth. This, you can see, is a person who has had great experience within the African Canadian community. In addition to being a wonderful trainer, Mr. Emmanuel Meles is also going to be a wonderful mentor to many of our young aspiring leaders. Last but not least, for our diversity and inclusion for success will be Mr. Moses Gashirabake, who is going to provide the diversity and inclusion training. Mr. Moses Gashirabake is an accomplished young leader who has been recognized by the City of Montreal, the Government of Quebec, and the Government of Canada for his civic engagement. Mr. Moses Gashirabake completed an honorary degree in political science at Concordia University before pursuing degrees in law at McGill University. He has a particular passion for philanthropy, non-for-profit organizations, post-secondary education, diversity and inclusion through civic and leadership engagement. During his undergraduate career, Mr. Moses won 32 academic and extracurricular awards for his excellence in leadership and in his academic works. Mr. Moses Gashirabake has actually been personally an inspiration for the work that he has put in, where he came to Canada and not just got comfortable and actually went to work. Him and many young people like him are the reason why we want to bring this project to you. So you can see that it's not for the special ones, that you too can do this. Let me introduce you to your trainers for the first of many Rwandan Canadian Healing Center project, the AlkebuLan Project Phase One, the African Canadian Leadership Training and the Capacity Support. Thank you very much. The goal for us as the Rwandan Canadian Healing Center, we set out to start an organization with a vision of providing a multi-dimensional platform for PTSD research and for education purposes. But we also understand that with the current environment that our community and of course the globe is under, where all of you come in is on the rebuilding part of our objectives, which is our third objective, helping young people rebuild after they have gone through understanding and learning about the challenges and through understanding in terms of learning and healing. And so we want them to also rebuild, but we want to focus on them doing the things that they love to do. So we have looked at the individuals that actually have these programs, yes, that provide the organizing skills and the understanding in terms of what do I want to do in life, and also where do I get the tools to sort of do what I want to do, and how do I do it while I work with other Canadians. So that's where, for example, Mr. Emmanuel comes in terms of capacity building, Dr. Ol comes in terms of helping in terms of goals and purpose training, of course, Olivia Chow with the community organizing, and Moses, who prides themselves in terms of inclusion and cohesiveness in terms of how do we work with other Canadians and really bring the tools and the culture and the values of who we are as people and make it a part of what we do going forward. So without further ado, I'm gonna pose my first question to you, Dr. Olu. For people who are about to take this training, what should they expect from you, from the training that you're going to provide?
Well, for the participants that we look forward to welcoming, we expect to focus on the leadership aspect of training, leadership aspect of life, and finding your purpose. You know, when you talk about knowing exactly what you want to do in life, with your life, and how to actually focus on, you know, actualizing those goals. Well, that's what we'll be focusing on. One thing we have found in interacting with a host of people across our community is that a lot of people have great ideas and they're looking forward to, you know, implementing and executing some of those ideas. But, you know, the know-how, the strategy to full execution of those ideas is actually a major issue. So there's that huge gap between what you know you would like to do and how you go about achieving those goals. And these are some of the things that we'll be focusing on in the course of the training. The initial steps will be to help people identify what talents they have, what skills they have, what competencies, and how to apply those skills and competencies, how to determine the best fit, you know, the area where they would want to focus on, and to find the right partners, perhaps, to help them actualize some of these goals. These are some of the things that we would focus on at the onset. We have a lot of newcomers that we focus on too from time to time. A lot of them are trying to find their feet in a new location, in a new country. Not only do they not understand fully how the system works, how to, you know, get funding, for instance, for whatever talents and skills that they plan on developing. And so these are some of the things that would guide them through, help them find the right partners, the right tools to work with, and perhaps some other resources that they could also work with. Usually in the course of our training, we find that even after people have identified the skills and competencies that they'd love to run with, a major challenge perhaps would also be how to go about setting up the structures, how to go about finding themselves and focusing on you know, the right skills. So we have situations where people have identified 3, 4, 5, 6 skills, things that they're good at, things that they've done, where they're coming from. And then it's different to know what you're really good at and then what the people you're serving need. So you find people wanting to really, because that's their comfort zone. So they want to run with, for instance, take a skill like selling some products or services. And they want to run with that immediately because that's what they're good at. However, do people really need that product? Do they need the service? And so this is part of the journey that we will guide people through so that they understand that the fact that you really love to do this does not actually imply that people actually need what you love to run with. So there is that huge gap that must be balanced. So you've got to find a midpoint where you harmonize what you really want to do and make sure there's a best fit out there. So you don't get frustrated in the process of starting the service or providing the service, and then you suddenly realize that although I really love to do this, but most people don't really want it. So these are some of the things that we would try to find a balance between as we start our process.
The way we designed this program, you will be taking, initially you are the first person they're gonna meet, which is the first Tuesday next week. Yes. And on Wednesday, it's going to be Olivia Chow, who is going to take on the training in terms of the community organizing. So Olivia Chow, having understood the program, or at least what the expectation is from Dr. Olu when these participants are working with Dr. Olu, for you, what is the journey you're going to take them on? So in the I guess the same question, but in terms of like community organizing, presenting the narrative and really sort of becoming their own individual within the community. What is the expectations for the participants through your program?
We're going to help them dig deep inside them to find out what drives them. What is their core values? What is the biggest challenge they face in life that they were able to make a choice and found the strength and the hope to bring them forward. Find that, be able to express it. And then take that to say, hey, that is the challenge we are observing in the community we are serving. These are the challenges that not just me, but other people experience. That's the challenge we collectively face. Then how are we going to act together in order to make the change now? How do I take my passion and recruit maybe 2 volunteers, 3 volunteers, 5 volunteers? Who am I recruiting? How am I going to recruit them? After I recruit them, how are we going to form a team? I won't be able to pay everybody, but how am I going to hold that team together? Can we find the common core values that tie us together, that have us commit with each other so that we can move as a team to find the power we need in order to make the change we want? What is the change we want? Precisely. What is the goal, the measurable goal? It could be, ending poverty, healing. What does that mean? What does that mean? How do you measure success? Identify the goals, find the strategy, and then brainstorm, be creative, and find the tactics that work. And then come up with an action plan. Who does what by when? And then let us celebrate the success to say, aha, here's the plan. We're beginning to do this. Here's our team. And we can tackle our goals and be able to make it become a reality. Dreamers with their eyes open is very powerful, especially when they are all connected with each other and it can get done.
Thank you. And Emmanuel Meres, you will take over from Dr. Olu after week 6. And so knowing that these young people, the goal for us is for them to have organizational, like to have a structure, which is one of the challenges that we face in the African community, where we have organizations, but they're not structured. Long term, we start projects and we end up stopping because there is a lack of, maybe there's no board of directors or there is no capacity. And that's where you come in terms of capacity building, good governance, all of these necessary things that an organization requires. And it's not just an organization, it could also be an entrepreneur that wants to sort of understand what are and I think that's where even Dr. Olu, maybe like if we have going towards the 2nd year, we can continue building on that for the ones that are entrepreneurs. But for the ones that have organizations or are leaders of the community, what should they expect once they have gone through this goal and purpose training, and they understand how to move the idea into like community and recruiting people? Now, how do you help them really have a long-term strategy so they have a team that can continually build and so we can have a long-term success for their individual and organization goals?
I don't think you need me and Moses after Dr. Olu and Olivia have done their work. I think they will be ready to go, because the sense that I'm getting from both sessions is that I think in leadership, the most important thing is to get to know yourself. Yeah, as Olivia and Olu were talking about, Olivia used the word dig deeper. Yeah, know your core values, your drive, and so on. And I think Dr. Olu was talking about purpose and actualizing goals. I think what perhaps I could offer is a kind of a reality check discussion. As you probably know me, Kizito, in the few years that you have known me, I have literally rolled up my sleeves and delved deeper in the community organizing, leadership development, organizational and network building movement within the continental African community sector. Yeah? And most of my work was deep there, but also was bridging between continental Africans and Africans, various Africans or various blacks of different African descent, yeah, whether it's Caribbean or others within Canada. And I think, in fact, at the moment, I'm very much involved at the national level within the UN Decade of People of African Descent. And I mean, most of my day, Olivia was talking about Zoom calls, was spent in Zoom calls around this issue. Last night, I facilitated a call with 100 leaders across the country with Adam Vaughan and, Director of Policy and Minister Ahmed Hassan's office around this pandemic and how it's affecting Black communities, yeah? And I had a diverse set of people from Montreal to Vancouver, Halifax, and in between. Some grassroots leaders, some organizational leaders, some established, some business leaders and so on. And I think for my session, I think, I will start taking young leaders into the context of organizational leadership. Yeah? And organizational leadership talks a little bit about how organizations are governed, which is kind of the boring stuff around governance and so on, if you want, yeah? But I do a lot of governance work with small grassroots organization. And I talk a lot about generative governance, yeah? When you take responsibility and take care of your fiduciary responsibility and your strategic, what's that energy and space in that governance table that talks about generative conversations, yeah? And I think, like it's also really taken from where both Dr. Olu and Olivia will leave these young leaders to talk about what is change? How does change happen? And how does change happen? Change happen because, as Olivia was talking, like you have your drive, your passion, your action plan, and then you recruit your volunteers, you have a team, and you make things happen. Change also happens through the agency of an entity called organization, yeah, or a network of people. So taking people to really understand the spectrum of how change happens so that they can see themselves in it, yeah, would be critically important. And so I would be challenging young leaders to really understand what mental models are, for example, and trying to really understand themselves in terms of what are the mental models that they are bringing in the day in their engagement in a particular project or setting and so on, or challenge, yeah? There is a lot of capacity building, yeah? But the most important question that I want to leave them was capacity building to what end, yeah? And so I think if earlier I was saying, like, if it is to try to really collectively tackle these challenges, I want to have a very practical discussion about what are the challenges in their communities today and how they have evolved in the last 20 years in Toronto or wherever they are, yeah? And there is a pattern there of the challenge. And so part of this is how do they start breaking, if you want, some of the patterns that are not working positively for their communities, yeah? There are those patterns that are working well, and how do they amplify that, yeah? And so part of that, they cannot do that if they don't really have purpose, if they don't have drive, if they don't know themselves, yeah? If they don't understand what change is, yeah? And I think I also want to introduce them this concept of system leadership. Individual leadership is important, yeah? But their communities are confronted with this host of systemic challenge in the area of housing. Dr. Ol was talking about newcomers. Yeah, we have a lot of Africans who have come into Canada in the last 5 years, 7 years. Unlike other refugees that were in yesteryears, resettled through government programs, most of the refugees that are coming now, they are coming with untreated trauma. They come to this country and they are hoping that there will be housing, there will be settlement support. That's not good enough anymore. They are dealing with a lot of internal trauma. And that's why it's not coincidence that in our communities now, you see a greater incidence of suicide, domestic violence, and mental health incidents. And so what does it mean to lead in this context? You're dealing with systemic challenge. You need to be able to talk about, yes, your drive is important, your purpose is important, actualizing your goals is important, but I think you need to know your locus of control. What is that you control in terms of the change agenda? So what I will be engaging them is like really to understand what's their mental models, what's within their locus of control. Like, for example, I will have a discussion with them about, at the end of the day, you cannot resolve some of the systemic challenges if you don't exercise collaborative leadership, if you don't work in a system environment, yeah? And that's why the concept of system leadership is important. That individual leadership, organizational leadership is great, community leadership is great, but we need to start saying, we have to tackle mental health problems in the African Canadian community, or if we have to tackle domestic violence in the African Canadian community, that's a system problem that requires system leadership. And what is that? And there is some great work done in some of the latest work that Peter Senge has done. There's actually an article on system leadership that was published at the Stanford, I think now 3-4 years ago, that I would send to them as ahead of time to read so that we can have a good discussion. I think I wanted to introduce them to some of the work that Otto Scharmer has done at MIT, which has informed a lot my leadership journey, myself, and the work that I have done over the years in this city and elsewhere. This concept that you have to suspend your inner voices of judgment and cynicism and fear to let go and allow some new stuff to emerge, to have a different sense of your environment and a presence of your mind, so that you are able to ask the two most important questions in leadership, which is, who am I? What's my legacy? So I'm hoping that this engagement would be, it's almost like, for me, I'm a former marine ecologist by training. So my young professional life, I've spent it in marine tropical ecosystems in different oceans and seas. So a lot of my approach is ecosystem thing. So I would raise questions like, what is the state of the continental African black ecosystem today? What's ailing in this ecosystem? What's working in this ecosystem? What's your role in that ecosystem? And in doing that, I think I want them to be able to say that the calling of leadership is higher than you. And unless you have the purpose, unless you have the drive, unless you know your core values, unless you have your toolbox with the right templates and tools, then you will not be able to actually drive that type of change that's needed, yeah? Okay. I think probably 45 years, if I take Toronto as an example, since continental African communities have set foot in this city. A little bit more, but about 45 years, yeah? And there are some connecting threads of the challenge of these communities. And we need to be able to ask, why, for example, around suicide in these communities, for example, if I just pick 3 communities, the Eritrean, Somali, and Ethiopian communities put together, because I know more the data there. In the last 2 years, we've lost close to 22, 23 people to suicide in this city, okay? And most of them are millennials, and most of them are people who have come into this country in the last 5-7 years. Most of them have untreated trauma, yeah? And so for me, I think like when we talk about these communities and leading for these young people, they need to know what the context of their communities is. And then they need to be reminded that they don't need to remain within the patterns of the perimeters of their communities. They need to be able to come out and learn from other communities. They need to be able to build bridges with other communities. We need to really be social justice actors in the city. How can they do that if they don't know themselves?
Yes,
and
Manuel, and I think that's where you and Moses bridge. I didn't mean to cut you off, but I think that's where
no, and I'm done. And the only thing I would say is that I always like to be able to bring the mind, which is the knowledge base, the heart, the empathy, and connection to the issues and challenges in their communities. But more importantly, hands, how they can have the toolbox, the means to be able to affect their leadership. So I'm excited about the possibility of being part of this. The last comment I make is that some of you might have heard about City Leaders, the Creative Institute for Toronto Young Leaders, which we launched when I was at United Way in the senior team, maybe 12, 13 years ago, which graduated 150 young leaders with a certificate in leadership. And there were 18 different organizations, UFT and Buffalo State University with the 2 academic partners. And I think that Leadership Institute that we launched has taught me a lot, because we were able to graduate young people that today are doing a lot of meaningful work. And the way that we have done it, we were able to go away from the traditional model of producing leaders in an assembly line to one where you dig deeper into the soul searching about why does leadership matter at the end of the day. And to be able to bring to young people, at least in Toronto, most of my work, to really understand how their placement is in a changing city, if they have to change the city and change Canada.
Thank you. And so I was saying that that's where you and Moses bridge, because when it comes to Moses, and for me, I've told you before, because we know each other for the last 4 years. And one of the things that I loved about you is you came to this country when you were much older, and you didn't allow that to stop you from dreaming big and to really succeed in this country. And so I was really, I wanted you to come with your personal experience, but also your experience in your professional life, to really sort of be like an inspiration to them and say, within this country, when we come here, one thing a lot of us do when we sort of succeed is we tend to forget about our individual values, the ones that we come with. And I think that having our young people, not even just the young people, but the people that are building organizations, know that diversity and inclusion is important. But the idea of having us come to the table and bringing our values with us is very important. And of course, including people that are different, and sort of making sure that the success of this country requires us to be inclusive, and to definitely have our own diverse backgrounds on the table. So in that way, how are you going to approach this, knowing the different training they will have come through having, now they have their goal, they know what they want to do, they have a system that they want to approach in terms of community organizing, and of course the capacity is something that we want to push and make sure that we have as a group. Where would you take it from this? Because they will be looking, this group is going to be with you. You'll be like the last person working with them. Of course, I want to invite everybody at the end when we have a retreat, which I don't know when because of this COVID thing. But a lot of these young people will be working with you. And of course, as a youth leader yourself, I wanted them to sort of feel like, okay, now we're working with somebody that understands us in terms of age, like all of these challenges, they can actually look at you and say, oh, he's dealing with it and he's our age. So we have no excuse to do the same approach, to do the same work.
Yeah, thank you, Kizito. And I'd like to thank the other trainers as well. I think you're going to lay the groundwork for my presentation. And I definitely agree with all of you that, the youth really need to be shown the capacities that they have and the opportunity, be it, in business, in government, or the nonprofit sectors, and the ability for them really to use what they have to achieve way more than they can achieve. So, as Kizito mentioned, I came to Canada about 13 years ago at the age of 19. And at the minds of very many young people like myself, who came to Canada as immigrants or refugees or, newcomers, as they say, is that, there are lots of opportunities that were not available to, people who looked like me or people who are not, born in Canada. And the main issue that I saw was, racism and discrimination, comes a lot to the minds of, young African Canadians and other diverse communities. And I think, Emmanuel did allude to it a little bit, where young people have a mindset that is, I wouldn't say limiting, but a mindset that is not looking at things in a systemic manner. And that really has a lot of impact on your ability to do a lot. And sometimes it's true. I remember when I was doing my undergrad in political science, and my ultimate goal was to go on and study law at McGill Law School. I had some, not only members of my, my community, but also other communities saying, that's almost unattainable. But what really made me believe is, the ability to, to have the end in mind. What do I need for me to attain a particular goal from, being an undergraduate student, attaining what it takes to be admitted into law school. So my presentation will necessarily introduce the fact that, over the last decade, there has been tremendous changes in the system. So be it, demographic, as has been alluded by my fellow trainers. So you have a lot of immigrants coming to Canada. There's also economic forces, political forces, societal realities, and the market demand. So more and more organizations and government and the market is starting to recognize that their future success is definitely linked to the ability to tap into the new workforce and customer base. So basically understanding that the diversity and inclusion is inevitable for success, and obviously the fact that diversity is strength. When you have teams that have people coming from different perspectives, the results tend to be much more, the numbers are good. So employers and organizations today, and even young people who want to start business, need to recognize the opportunity and the critical importance that, the changes in the market are presenting them. So they need to seize the opportunity. And of course, I'm not going to be naive and act as if, we've reached a point where, Canada or other Western countries, and particularly when we look at young people that are coming from not necessarily the metropoles, that, diversity and inclusion have been achieved 100%. Absolutely not. But then, with the work that's being done by all of you, people that are trying to present opportunities for young people, I think we're really on a continuum. So if you look, one of the other things that I'm going to highlight is the historical changes where, the evolution of diversity and inclusion came from, the different stages of, the civil rights movement, and then we moved to affirmative action. And affirmative action had, both people saying good things and bad things about it. On one hand, you're getting organizations to hire historically discriminated groups, but on the other hand, people are saying, people with no required skills are being put into the market. And then that continuum has come to now organizations managing diversity and inclusion. And eventually, the ultimate goal is where diversity and inclusion is not only a need, but also a strategic imperative for organizations. So I'm sort of like painting a high level picture, but my training will essentially, present the opportunities that are available to young people. What do you really want to achieve? What you want to achieve can be done within this, system that is Canada, and that young people need to look at, the deep skills and the knowledge that they have that are beyond either their skin color, sex, and other barriers that, either the society or young people look at themselves through. So essentially, the training will also involve interactions with young people, so breakout sessions where we're going to wrap up and look at the different the continuum of diversity and inclusion, and how young people can actually be able to situate themselves within the fact that organizations are complying with the market forces and where to situate themselves. And then obviously, one of the other components is the fact that we need to build allies. So it's not just within your own, say, Rwandan Canadian community, or your Chinese Canadian community, your Eritrean Canadian community, or your Nigerian community, but looking at other communities that are doing interesting things, because when Canada introduced the multiculturalism policy, it was a good policy on paper, but some critics have mentioned that this policy would actually be good if we practice it. How do we provide more opportunities for different communities to learn about each other and to break the stereotypes and the different barriers and misunderstandings that might be impeding the full realization of the diversity and inclusion end goal. So in a nutshell, this is what I'm going to do. This is definitely a very high level thing, but at the end of the day, I think we really need to energize the young people to seek to develop self-confidence and move on to become who they want to be.
Thank you, Moses, and I appreciate that. I want to actually go just to go to my next question, which is, I want for all of us to sort of maybe chime in and be brief. So because I think what I did is I didn't tell everybody like when the program was going to end, as in the interview, but I think if we can end it within the next 15 minutes, it should be really good. So the next question is a question that I want all of us to chime in together, because it's more about how important is it to provide a group training for individuals with a common goal. And I want you, Moses, to maybe start with it, and then the rest of us can chime in and sort of give your take on how important is it for these individuals, 24 of them, how important is it for them to actually take this training together? Because the common goal for us, of course, as a group, other than the fact that everybody sort of has their own individual goal that they want to focus on, we also want to work together to create like an umbrella organization that can actually help provide support for African Canadian communities. So how important is it for us as a group to take this training together? Go ahead, Moses.
Things that African Canadian youth, when you come into Canada, that we need to understand is that the power of networks and networking and being able to tap into the skills the abilities of different individuals. So I think I'm really excited to see, you know, the young people. I'm 100% sure they're going to come with, you know, lots of ideas and potential and achievements and the ability, you know, their networks and the different kinds of interesting things that they've done in the past and they're looking forward to doing in the future. So, you know, for them coming together, for me, I think, you know, it's, you know, unity is strength. So they're coming together to form a bigger network, and if they could leverage on the fact that they're doing the training together to create new initiatives. They could be businesses, they could be nonprofit organizations, they could be opportunities in different, you know, corporate sector or the government sector. So basically leveraging on the network and sharing ideas and resources and tools and their enthusiasm. And maybe friendship, who knows?
Absolutely. How about you, Dr. Olu?
Well, one of the ethics that we teach at EP Academy is the power of co. And by the power of co, when we talk about the power of co, we talk about the various aspects of collaboration, the power, the strength in collaboration. I think Amanuel's alluded to collaborative leadership and the advantages of adopting that as a major style of leadership, particularly for newcomers. And so you talk about the power of co, where you co-learn, co-fund, co-develop, co-share, collaborate, partnerships, co-share. For instance, sharing offices when you actually grow and you believe you should start a business, the cost-saving measure inherent in sharing resources is amazing, and it's not quantifiable most times. The fact that you're in the same space, you're learning together, you're sharing ideas, you're sharing what you did in the past, the lessons you learned from the errors of the past, the challenges you faced in time past, how you manage those challenges, and coming into a space like that and during a session like that, and sharing with other people can be very powerful. And these are some of the things that we'll be teaching on the benefits of the powers and the strengths in sharing ideas, in collaborating. In the course of the training, we actually would also introduce like an exchange, a session like a roundtable on entrepreneur exchange, we call it, but then of course we'll adopt a name that is suitable, but it's called entrepreneur exchange. At a session like that, we have people sit around the table, like you have a debate, and people actually get 2 minutes each, almost like a pitch, to talk about some of their most challenging situations that they've ever faced, and one solution, that they found, to address that particular situation. People get to learn from that. You failed in this regard, what did you do? Some people learn from that. You succeeded in this regard, how did you address it? What led you to such successes and accomplishments? A lot of people around the table will always learn from that. One thing I have also found is that in sharing ideas and teaching groups of people who share a common goal, friendships are built. Who knows? Partnerships could also evolve from such, from such groups. So that's another way we teach, and we will be introducing that. One last thing that I would like to share is that in the course of our sessions, we would always introduce a project, either a community-based project that we want people to work on, and so they identify a major gap within their communities, what they've seen within their communities, and how they think that they can address those challenges. In a group of 5, with teams of 5 set around a group, people come together within a week, within a 2-week period. So it's a take-home assignment, and they get to meet independently outside of class. And they come back towards the end of the program to make a presentation to the faculty on the solutions that they are proposing to that particular or that identified challenge within the community. What we find is that when people get together to sit on projects, to discuss projects, and to find solutions to community issues, they get closer in the process. And they are, they have solutions, they make presentations, And those presentations are actually presented even to financiers, and that takes them to another level of finding their dreams, because some of those projects will eventually get adopted, either by the current classes or future classes that we're on. So these are some of the ways that we, those are the methods that we adopt, and these are some of the ways that we actually build cohesion and collaboration and, togetherness within the teams that we will be teaching at the start. Thank you.
I muted myself once again. Emmanuel, you want to go ahead?
I think the experiential learning component, as Ol was talking about, is critically important. Yeah, that's why in any facilitative work around leadership, community development, or change that I have done, I always talk about the mind, the heart, and the hands. Yeah, so there has to be something experiential there that allows them to problem solve on a critical community challenge, or help them to a lot of business schools do simulated change learning, for example. Yeah, but I think, as I said, in the context of their communities, continental African communities, there are quite few areas that require a resolution that could be brought to the class. I think part of the question around why this is important, it's in terms of a group learning, group training. It's also like, as Olivia was saying earlier on, like if you start working together as a team, the capacity to hold the team, it takes you to, as I was saying earlier on, yeah, you come into the space to work with others, and you have all sorts of mental models that you bring to the space of others, assumptions. And that's why you need to start like suspending those inner voices of judgment and fear and what have you of others, yeah? And I think the group learning and group training was critically important. I've shared with you in the past some of the work that Kirkpatrick has done, for example, to start imagining training differently, moving from this concept of training alone to learning effectiveness, and trying to really introduce to the training environment some of the things that Dr. Ol was talking, for example, that there is something that complements the training process that actually allows them to simple satisfaction and reaction at level 1 to all the way to results and impact at level 4. So I think if people are not familiar with the Kirkpatrick model, I found it really useful in terms of the work that I have done in training over the years that takes you to this concept of just training to learning effectiveness. So excited about this and look forward to it.
Olivia, Chow?
I'm actually going to push the young people when they come together to have one goal that is measurable, that they could say, and looking back by June 17th, which is the last day of my training, that we have accomplished this one small goal. They will have bigger goals because I'll leave it in your team's good hands. You will have much bigger goals, but I am into small successes so they can get the confidence in themselves first. So I'm going to actually force them into getting their goals narrowed down into something that they can do within this 8 weeks, okay? And it could be, I cannot prejudge what it might be, but I have some ideas, okay? Knowing what the center have been looking for and trying to do. And then I'm going to move that from an organizing statement as to what is your goal, who are you bringing together, how many friends do you have, family members, within the time that you are social distancing, but you can still do Zoom, you can still do something. Who are you bringing together? And I need you to get it done by June 17th as the first project together. And then what I'm going to do on May 6th, I'm going to be really clear to say what drives you, what motivates you, what is that core value, what gives you strength, what gives you hope. I'm going to ask you to be able to say it, and I'll teach you how to do public speaking and be able to say it well and be able to impress. And if you can't tell a story, I'm going to get you to elicit as much emotional response from your speaker, for your listener, as much as possible. And we'll rehearse that. We will then say to them, okay, now that you have your story, how are you going to take the story to recruit other people? And we were going to come together, and I need you to come together to accomplish that common goal. And if I'm going to challenge them, because they're all working together, all 24 of them, and said, how many are you going to recruit? 2, 4? Tell me. And then the week after, I'm going to teach them how to recruit. And then the week after, they're going to come together and say, okay, we recruited them. How are we going to work together as a team? What are we going to try to do? What is our action plan? When are we going to do this? Okay. And then if they realize that, oh, we need messaging skills, we need fundraising skills, we need to know how to use social media. Oh, we need to do digital campaigning. Oh, there is 20,000 Rwandan folks in GTA. Do we have the list of them? Can we find the list? Who are the leaders in the social media? How are we going to find them? I'm going to get them to work together as a team so that they can feel the power to make the difference together and be able to communicate. Okay. And what kind of skills is going to be a bit, we'll see what kind of project they end up in, because everybody will have different skills. And I'm going to try to get them to work in groups, in teams, to accomplish one thing, measurable success. And we'll celebrate it by June 17th. We'll have an open house. We're going to ask them to invite all their friends to come together to say, all right, here we are. This project, this goal will be successful or not successful, depending on whether you're going to pull together and depending on how we're going to celebrate it. Just you knowing about it is not good enough. Who do you want to celebrate it? How are you going to invite them? And yes, we can do it all through Zoom. How many people are you targeting? Oh, let's invite as many as possible. No. Are we inviting 10 each? Are we bringing 100 people together to celebrate on June 17th? Or are we bringing 1,000, or are we bringing 30? Okay, fine. You set the goal. Let's see how we can get it. Okay, we'll introduce that early on so they have to work together as a team. That is how we're going to structure. It's actually quite structured. And the last few sessions, precisely what skills we shall see depending on who we are working with. But I do want them to taste success, taste they can do something together and feel the power they have when they work together.
Thank you so much. And so my last question, I think, goes back into what you just said about one thing. And I wanted everybody to give me the one thing that these participants should expect. What should they know? So obviously for Dr. Olu, I think for you, it's more about focusing on like entrepreneurship, because that's your area of focus. Let's say there's somebody who's an entrepreneur in your training. What is the one thing that they should expect? And for Emmanuel, what is the one thing that a leader, community leader, somebody who is a leader of an organization, what should be the one thing that they take away from this program? And let me just start from Dr. Olu, but for all of you, I should be specifically for what is that particular training that you're providing. So I'm thinking for Olivia Chow is more about community organizing. What is that one thing that you want them to know? And for diversity and inclusion, Moses, what is that one thing that these individuals individually they should take away? If there is just one particular thing they take away from this training, what is that one thing? And I'll go back to Dr. Olu and then
well, as an entrepreneur, what I would like for them to know is that no is not the end of a story. No, getting turned down. No does not mean it's the end of a story. It just means getting back to the drawing board and rebooting and rethinking the project and then making a presentation again. And so I speak as a business person. You get what I mean now. So when people tell you no, perhaps you're looking for funding, you're looking for partnerships, they say no, it's not the end of the story. It only means you should get back to the drawing board and make a fresh presentation and rethink the strategy.
And Emmanuel?
I think for me, the summation of all the engagements in terms of really understanding themselves and the context of their communities. By the time I'm completing my session there, I'm hoping that that they really understand that they're needed in leading solutions in their continental African communities, and that they will have a good grounding and understanding of their issue and challenges, that they have the tools and the readiness to be able to release it. So I think, like, you know, I'm involved in a lot of stuff in Black communities across the country and in the city. And I don't see the continental African leaders. I don't see the young leaders there. And so my hope is that for the multiple challenges, systemic challenge that their communities are facing, there are governments, foundations, businesses, faith leaders. They're all ready to work and be there to engage in solutions for their communities. And if there is one thing that I want them to come out of this, is like that they realize they are needed to exercise leadership now. There are problems that are ready to be solved, waiting for them, and that they will be inspired enough to be able to step in to tackle some of the challenges that we have today in continental African communities. Out of the 100 leaders I had on the call last night, probably there were a handful from the continental African communities. A handful. So that's the problem of this community. So if there is one thing that I want, is that they jump in and take the baton and lead their communities.
Thank you very much. And Moses, how about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think mine will be finding opportunity in every challenge. I think the lack of diversity and inclusion in many communities across Canada is a big challenge, but there's definitely opportunities that could be harnessed and used. Thank you.
Thank you. And Olivia?
I'm going to get them to answer one question. Well, actually, it's a three-part question. If I am not for myself, who am I? If I'm only for myself, what am I? If not now, when? It's who, what drives me? Us. So that's self, us. What are our needs together? What can we do together? Now, what is the action? So that's, but the core, at the core of it is, who am I? That's one question I want them to answer.
Yeah.
And thank you so much. I've taken quite an hour from your time. Hopefully you forgive me. I didn't really give you like a whole summary of like how long it was gonna take. I honestly didn't know, but I think we managed to do it within an hour, which is perfect. So thank you so much for everyone. Next week, for Dr. Olu and Olivia Chow, next week we start training. And if anything, I just wanted to thank you again for agreeing to be the trainers for this group. I really wanted all of you to be the first people that start this training, because I realized this is where anybody who wants to build should start, you know, knowing what you want to do and how to do it, and then having the capability to do it, and then who do you do it with, understanding the environment. And so that's where you all come in. So thank you so much.